There were 4 sets of whistles aboard the Titanic, last sounded at noon on April 14th, 1912. This set was the only one recovered with its pieces still intact. The conserved whistles went on tour in Titanic exhibits until 1998, but they had not sounded since that day in 1912. Would their voice ever be heard again? Since that fateful night, the story of Titanic has infused a sense of wonder into the imaginations of millions worldwide. In 1998, the heads of the Titanic exhibit in St. Paul, Minnesota, decided to call upon the services of the Kallenberg brothers in Two Rivers, Wisconsin. Their objective: determine if the recovered whistle set could be sounded for the first time since 1912.
The Kallenberg brothers started in 1895. My great-grandfather was an internal combustion engine pioneer. In the 1930s, during the Depression, they expanded into other things. So there were sound signaling equipment, air horns, and that's the biggest part of it now. So it was kind of a natural fit for us to do something with the Titanic Whistle project.
We were invited over just to see if they were in any condition to be blown.
I went to St. Paul with Zach, and we took a look at them. And we knew that they had been restored, at least, cosmetically, they had been cleaned up for display. But internally, we didn't know if they'd be full of, barnacles or crud or whatever.
It was pretty cool. Just the size of them. Almost 5 feet tall with the manifold going up. About 750 pounds, I estimated.
Just to be able to physically handle them would be difficult. I think they were the largest whistle ever made. We didn't know what kind of shape they were in until we saw the x-rays. Shining a flashlight up there didn't help a whole lot, and nobody at the time had the camera probe or anything, that sophisticated.
I was curious as to see if there was any air pockets inside the castings, because sometimes castings are hollow.
2 of the whistles were completely intact. There were no issues. I think the largest one in the center, because the stems of the whistle were hollow. The stem is the part that really holds up that big dome, that big bell shape you see on it. That part of the largest whistle had imploded, but not entirely. Just enough where obviously the pressure was relieved and water went in. But they were at least structurally sound enough to start putting some low pressure air through them to see if they would work.
But first, the whistles had to make a 300-mile journey from St. Paul, Minnesota, to the Kallenberg brothers' factory in Two Rivers, Wisconsin.
The boss at the exhibition, he told me, "Do you want to go along?" And so I went.
We had a white Ford cargo van that was like driving a buckboard.
We came back. I think we got back a little after midnight through an ice storm.
I'm a New Englander. I'm used to snow, but this was snow.
We laughed about it on the way, but it really wasn't funny. We had a, priceless artifact in the back of the panel van through an ice storm. It didn't really seem to make a lot of sense. Like, there should have been a safer way to do it.
But they were in really, really good cases, so we didn't have to worry too much. They were safer than we were, let's put it that way.
We got them here and hung on to them overnight in Zach's garage.
My neighbor, Mary Ellen, next day, she came out with the paper. "Hey, Zach, it says here in the paper that, the Titanic whistles are in Two Rivers." And then she saw the van. She goes, "So what's with the van?"
Here comes the first whistle. At the Kallenberg brothers in Two Rivers, Wisconsin. The recovered whistle set is safely placed to ensure no damage.
We had to make sure that there wasn't any debris on the interior where if you put pressure to it, it would hit the bell of the whistle and potentially damage it.
There was a lot of sediment from the bottom of the ocean still in there. So that was the first step. You have to be careful. It's priceless, and you don't want to damage it.
We actually set up each of the whistles independently. There's a lot of harmonics, a lot of sound content there. If you were to put them all together immediately, you don't necessarily know that each of the whistles is performing well. We started on low pressure.
a little more pressure. If there's any loose debris in there that you missed, you're not going to do any damage.
Oh, there ain't going no more than that.
Good.
Huh? It's coming out of there.
That was foremost in our mind. Don't hurt the whistles.
Everyone had to wear ear protection because you wouldn't want to be left deaf by this process.
You hear that?
I had ear protection on, but my ears were ringing for much of the day.
Give it. Give it. I'll just let it run up.
Think of blowing across the lid of a pop bottle. There's no moving parts. It's just physics. It's a musical instrument.
I had the chance to pull the lever to blow, I think it was the center whistle.
With each whistle tested and functional, the team was ready to sound them all together.
People in that room, they knew this was a moment unique.
It looks a lot bigger in person, doesn't it?
We're hearing this for the first time since 1912. No one else has heard this.
Go.
It was the most heart-stopping moment because it occurred to me, this is Titanic's voice.
It was a massive sound.
Was that pretty loud?
It put so much air through the test chamber, you literally feel the gust of air pushing you back out the door.
Wow.
It was this tortured, anguished groan from the past, like the ship was crying out and the voice suddenly broke, and then the voice emanated and faded, almost as if it was crying out from 1912. It was very powerful.
You welcome. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Once it was determined it was safe to blow the whistles,
They took them back, and it was a couple months until they had everything set up to do the sounding in St. Paul.
When word got out the whistles were going to be blown in St. Paul, Titanic enthusiasts from around the world started making travel plans.
My mother, probably about the mid-70s, told me about this wonderful ship called the Titanic. It struck an iceberg and sank with a great loss of lives, but the ship was very beautiful and very elegant. And of course, I found it so fascinating. 1999, we heard that the Titanic exhibit was going to be in St. Paul. Gotta go, right? Loaded up my two small boys, my wife. Of course, you gotta take the video camera with.
It was really something. The crowd was massive. I mean, the streets were packed, and I had to say a few words. So I said a few words. I don't think they were very good words.
Today, as we listen to the haunting sound of our last ship, we should reflect on many heroes and innocent victims who lost their lives on a fateful night.
It was nerve-wracking. I mean, you could look out and you could not see the end of that sea of people going up into downtown. It was a stressful deal. And my thought at the time was, I hope they have enough air.
I was maybe 50 feet or so from the whistles. And the first time they didn't really do a countdown, they just said, here we go, and they blew them.
the reaction was a roar from the crowd. There was silence when people realized, this is Titanic we're hearing. A voice from the past, a dead voice, suddenly alive.
It was impressive. Far more so than it was when we had them here in our facility because the air was endless. And it's completely different outside. It doesn't sound like that when you're in a test chamber.
We wanted more. 3, 2, 1. And they blew them a lot longer this time, the second time. The crowd applauded and roared.
What moved me about the event in St. Paul was not the sound of the whistles, but the reaction of the people.
It was a happy time and also a sad time. Many people that perished that night, that's also what they heard before the ship sank.
I mean, you see it in pictures and then you see it in real life. It's right there. Brings it home a little bit.
It was like going back in time. I still can't believe it happened.
It was a very meaningful time. We were a part of the new history of the Titanic.
That day in St. Paul would be the last time the whistles were sounded. Due to their fragile condition, it was deemed too risky to attempt again. But for one glorious day, the sound of Titanic's voice awoke the imaginations of thousands.